Good afternoon to you. I'm Danilo Evangelista, and welcome to our tropical weather outlook video for today, Friday, June 20th, 2025, with these stupid notifications. Happy Friday to you. Let's start off by taking a look at the National Hurricane Center homepage to see what is going on right now in the world of tropics, and at least on the Atlantic side, nothing expected for the next week, the way it's been for the past several weeks, and it looks like it's going to be that way for the next several weeks to come in the Atlantic, while the Eastern Pacific is still remaining active. Eric obviously died over Mexico yesterday, and now there's just rainfall and cloud cover and stuff like that left over Mexico. But back in the Eastern Pacific, we are not done yet. It looks like this upcoming week, next week, we might get another tropical development in the Eastern Pacific. And if it does happen in time enough, it might be our earliest six-named storm ever recorded in the Eastern Pacific. Quite a representation of the magnitude of activity we've had in the Pacific so far, despite the fact that I don't really think a lot of people were expecting. Geez, what is with these notifications? I don't think a lot of people were really expecting the Eastern Pacific to be all that active this year, but certainly over the last several weeks so far, the first few weeks of the Eastern Pacific has proved anything but inactivity, and it looks like it's going to stay that way for the near future, as we could get potentially one more storm. The National Hurricane Center right now has an area of interest of 40% chance for the next 7 days. They say that an area of low pressure is forecast to develop early next week off the coast of Central America. And once again, environmental conditions appear conducive for some gradual development after that time, and a tropical depression could form as the system moves west-northwestward off the coasts of Central America and southern Mexico. And from at least the models that I've seen, this is going to stay offshore, but obviously you cannot let your guard down. I'll show you what the GFS model shows in a little bit. Here's a satellite image of how things look like in the Atlantic right now, and a little bit of the Eastern Pacific. You can see some of the cloud cover obviously left over from the remnants of Eric, still bringing heavy rain to large chunk of Mexico right now. And then you could see through the rest of Mexico and Central America, there seems to be some thunderstorms blowing up right now. So in general, lots of moisture over Central America and the Caribbean right now. But through the rest of the Atlantic, bone dry. You could especially see by these upper level clouds here, strong upper level wind shear, and I'll show you the wind shear graphic actually up next. You could see here, especially in the upper levels, very strong winds blowing out of the south and from the southwest, cutting across westerly across the upper levels of the atmosphere, and especially here through the Caribbean, the Gulf of Mexico, and into the Western Caribbean. Lots of very strong wind shear prevalent, a lot of these very strong winds blowing. And I think this is kind of associated with the leftover of the upper level anticyclone that was over Eric, which allowed Eric to very quickly intensify and become a major hurricane before it approached Mexico. But either way, very, very strong upper level winds cutting across pretty much the entirety of the Gulf and the Caribbean, and probably extends back here through the Eastern Atlantic as well. And obviously, wind shear is not a favorable factor for development at all when it comes to tropical development. So we're probably not going to get much development at all anytime soon, except if this wind shear lightens up. Makes sense as to why the National Hurricane Center has no chance of development at all for at least the next week. And the other part of it as to why lots of Saharan air out there. Obviously, we also have very strong trade winds this time of year, which helps really pump lots of dust that comes off of Africa into the Eastern Atlantic. And obviously, that is why we typically do not look out towards the Eastern Atlantic and the MDR for development this time of year, despite the activity we've had over the last several years in the MDR, especially Beryl last year. But there is absolutely no sign of that whatsoever occurring this year. And I should also mention that it is typical that we have a lot of Saharan air in the Eastern Atlantic right now, and that is certainly in place, and that'll help keep a lid of activity for the foreseeable future. And it makes sense as to why nothing has happened in the Atlantic yet. Lots of very strong wind shear and lots of Saharan air. But we still have tropical waves in the Atlantic right now. We have quite a few in the MDR, and looks like there's one in the Eastern Atlantic that maybe might have just come off of Africa. And there's also one in the Caribbean, and I think maybe this might be playing a role, or this wave in particular might play a role into helping whatever develop in the Eastern Pacific early next week. And I should also say that we have all these tropical waves in the Eastern Atlantic right now. They do, and they probably will bring gusty conditions and rain to the islands as they move through. And especially early on in the season, if these tropical waves, which most of them don't develop here in the Atlantic, they can sometimes, and a lot of them do, move on into the Eastern Pacific and help aid in development there. And that is partially what's been contributing to lots of development that we've had in the Eastern Pacific over the last several weeks, is these waves moving off of Africa. They chug across the Atlantic. They move with the trade winds. But obviously conditions are not favorable in the Atlantic, so they do not develop, but they get pushed into the Eastern Pacific instead and develop there. And it looks like we're probably going to get that to occur once again as we head into early next week. I'll show you the models in a little bit. But as for the rest of the Atlantic, we have more tropical waves that will be moving through and will once again probably bring gusty winds and heavy rain to the islands from time to time. And we really don't typically look at these tropical waves anyway as the direct source of development, especially out here in the Eastern Atlantic this time of year. And obviously one reason why is Saharan air, which I just showed you, and things in general are just not that favorable right now in the Eastern Atlantic for any of these waves to develop. We typically don't pay attention to them anyways till we really get to late July or August. But I'm pretty sure once we get to that time, this year included, we probably will see some of these waves begin to develop. And maybe we'll get a few of them that end up becoming long track storms, the whole deal. But as for right now, nothing expected to develop anytime soon. And I could just show you that really quickly with the 12Z GFS model run. Taking it out to the next week, absolutely nothing develops. We have a very strong high pressure that remains off the southeast and over the Bahamas and the southwestern Atlantic. That'll keep the trades very strong, and obviously will keep dry air and will really help prevent any of these waves and really anything to try to develop in the Atlantic at all. But we will see lots of very, very warm air get pumped into the southeast and across the entire eastern half of the United States. I can attest because next week, especially Monday and Tuesday, we might hit the triple digits here in the New York City metro area. And that will be in part because of this very, very strong Bermuda high that'll be in place all the way. Well, it really is the Azores Bermuda high because it'll be in place all the way from Azores and extend into the southeast, and you can just see quite a potent ridge. And this will also pump lots of hot air through the Caribbean into the Gulf. Maybe might help aid in some severe weather, especially across the high plains. They tend to get a lot of severe weather this time of year. And that'll also continue to help warm up sea surface temperatures across the Gulf, Caribbean, and off the southeast. And that'll especially set us up for by the time we get to July and August, when we will probably see development then. Will help us keep things very, very toasty, and probably have sea surface temperatures very ripe and more than warm enough for tropical development by then. And then in the Eastern Pacific, obviously you could see, especially as we head into the 6 to 7 day time frame, we do see some vorticity that tries to bundle and get going here, especially just south of Mexico. Same area that we've been seeing over the past several days and pretty much the past several weeks so far. Something that tries to develop south of Mexico. but obviously this is pretty much getting to the week time frame now. So not really very certain about whether or not this will impact Mexico or stay out to sea. We'll have to see how that develops, and we'll certainly monitor it here over the next several weeks. Obviously, given that we just had Eric, and you can't let your guard down anyways, because it is hurricane season. And really quickly, just to explain why we are having a lot of development in the Pacific right now, I wanted to bring up the MJO map, which this is what it is. There's a little bit of a confusing graphic if you cannot read it, but this is a representation of the MJO phases, and this green line here is the prediction of where we're going to get the MJO to move in. And then we kind of have these numbers here, which also depict the strength of the MJO right now. And at least over the next several days, or at least the forecast right now, is that the MJO will kind of remain in this null phase here, which is within this circle, but it does, at least over the next several days and weeks, going from now, June 20th, out till July 4th, Independence Day. So that's already in the time frame here for the models. The MJO does start to dip its way into phases 8 and 1, although it still stays in the null category, in the null phase, which is within this circle, so it's not necessarily all that amplified, but it does tip its toes into phases 8 and 1, which does favor Eastern Pacific activity, and phase 1 especially does favor a little bit of Atlantic activity. So that obviously explains as to why the Eastern Pacific will probably continue to stay active. We'll probably get another named storm or two over the next several weeks in the Eastern Pacific, as we head into the end of this month and into July. And maybe we'll have to watch the MJO to see if it amplifies enough, especially if it tries to dip its toes a little bit more into phase 1, and we'll get the MJO maybe into the Atlantic a little bit. And could that potentially open the door finally for some development in the Atlantic as we head into next month? Because it seems like, or at least the way it looks like right now, and we know that could change, especially because it's hurricane season, and during hurricane season, sometimes things just do change that quickly. But you never know, we can maybe get some random spin up off the southeast coast. We tend to get that, especially in the early season, and we have seen that in past years. So that could maybe be a saving grace, if you will, for last minute development for this month. But it looks like we're probably going to go the rest of June without seeing a single named storm in the Atlantic, and that certainly has not happened in quite a while. But it looks like it's going to happen this year. But maybe as we head into next month, we'll have to start watching to see when and if we do get our first named storm to develop then. But until then, things are nice and quiet across the tropics, at least for right now. That is going to do it for today's Tropical Weather Outlook. If you enjoy what you saw today, I would appreciate if you like, comment, and subscribe. Share this video with family and friends, and especially if you decide to subscribe, which I hope you do. Turn on the notification bell so you can get whenever I upload videos like this, because I upload them every day. And if you are interested in that kind of content, please consider subscribing. And if you have any thoughts as well, comment them, and I will try to answer back as soon as possible. With that being said, enjoy the rest of your day. Stay safe. Peace, love, and kindness to you all. I will be back tomorrow with another video.